Well, all right, everyone. It is about that time. I am so beyond excited to be tasting these wines right in front of me. I don't know what you know about Premiere Napa Valley, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. I just went live with my former sommeliers and press. If you would like the more detailed version and account of what happens at Premiere Napa Valley, I encourage you to watch that. But here we are for this tasting. I'm so excited. And I'm going to give you a little bit of background information before we jump into these three very special wines. I can assure you, these are about as rare as it gets in Napa Valley. Yes, even more rare than the Screaming Eagles and the Harlans. These wines are truly one of a kind. I have never tasted any of these bottles before. I probably never will again. And chances are you might not be able to either. Maybe a couple of these, we'll see. So what are we drinking tonight? Well, these are three wines from Premiere Napa Valley auction, which is something that happens every single year in Napa Valley since about the 1990s. Actually, it might be before that. I'm not actually sure. So it happens every year in February, and basically it is our version of Un Primeur or Hospice de Beaune. This is an auction that takes place just for the industry. So for people that are Napa Valley, or excuse me, people that are retailers, buyers for restaurants, buyers for any sort of wine purveyor comes to this auction, and literally people come from all around the world. It is an insane week. We were just talking about it on our previous preview live stream, and such a fun week, but just entirely overwhelming and insane. And then it culminates with this huge barrel auction at the end of the week on Saturday, where people raise their paddles for these incredible lots of wine, which consist of 5, 10, and 20 cases of custom wine that cannot be found anywhere else. And I cannot stress it enough. Literally, once it's gone forever. And so we have these cuvées, these Premiere Napa Valley cuvées, like you see in front of me. The person who bids the highest and gets that lot of wine, well, that's theirs forever, and they can do with it what they choose. Sometimes you see those wines out in the wild, but oftentimes those wines are already accounted for. So many times the buyers of these wines, of these auction lots, they already have people that are excited to drink these wines, and out the door they go, and you'll never see them again. The reason I have these particular wines is because they do save 2 bottles for the Napa Valley Vintners, and the Napa Valley Vintners has their own little stash of wines, and they were very generous to give me 3 of these bottles to celebrate Premiere Napa Valley release week, or Premiere release week. And basically what happens during this week is those wines that have gone up for auction, they all get compiled onto this website. You can sort by winery, you can sort by vintage, and you can see where you might be able to find some of these wines. Now, I will say, a lot of these wines, one in particular you won't be able to get, one you can get if you're in Japan, and then the other, I believe, is for sale in the United States. But the thing is, these are in such tiny quantities that we're not talking about wines that are readily available that you're going to find anywhere. So we are tasting literally the most special wines I think I've ever gotten my hands on, and I'm so excited. It's really rare for me to be able to taste Premiere Napa Valley wines because we just don't see them, and for as much Napa Valley wine as I've had in my career, and I've been fortunate that number is pretty high, these are wines that I have not had yet. So we are drinking the following wines this evening. Without any further ado, as I know you're here for the 2017 Honig. This is from the Campbell Hillside Vineyard, very small block from that vineyard. We are tasting the 2016 Keenan. This is the Tribute 2. And then first we're going to be tasting, because we're going to taste oldest to youngest, a 2010 Antica, which is a project from the Antinori family in Italy. So, and this is the Antinori one. So let's get into the wines. Let's get going. If you've got questions, please feel free to utilize that chat box. I will be ready to go to answer them. And let's see where these wines are taken. I have not tapped into these yet, so this will be just as a surprise for you as it is for me. Hooray. I am over the moon to be able to taste these wines. All right, 2010, kind of a wonky vintage in Napa. Vintage that I really like, though, especially from Hillside. So some of my favorite wines from this vintage are Larkmead, Schaefer, I certainly love 2010 Dun. I love wines from the hillside and sort of north for a couple of different reasons. I think structurally in 2010, a vintage that got a little bit of rain, was a complicated vintage. But the great producers always do really, really well in those complicated vintages. And I think Antinori is no exception. Of course, they've got, or Antica is no exception. Of course, they've got the long history of the Antinori legacy that is in Tuscany, historic properties that are from there. And of course, they've got their property here in Napa. This is the Antinori one. So this is from a single vineyard and tiny selections of grapes from that single vineyard called the Townsend Vineyards. So Antica is sort of on the eastern side on the mountain. If you've ever been to Continuum, which is at the very, very top of Pritchard Hill, just sort of adjacent from Chapelet, if you peek over the side, you can see down into some of Antica's vineyards that are very slopey and very hillsidey, and they sit at about 1,600 feet elevation, just the way the Antinoris like it. And like I said, this vineyard was purchased by the Antinoris by Piero Antinori in 1998 from June Townsend, who had farmed it and loved it and held on to it for many years prior to that. And June had befriended Piero and the Antinori family for many years and decided that that was the right person to steward the land when she was ready to sell it. So this is not only a single vineyard from their estate vineyard, but a handful of selected grapes from that vineyard. So, single vineyard and then some. And this was only 10 cases. So you think about a barrel is about 25 cases. So less than half of that. That is what was made in 2010. I do not know where this wine got to. I don't know who purchased this wine, and I don't know what it went for. What I will tell you is that last year in 2020, or I guess this year still, gosh, we're not out of it yet. 2020 PNV auction, that highest lot went to Rudd Estate for $100 and wait for it, $20,000 for 20 cases of wine. So I'll let you guys go ahead and do the math on that. Actually, it might have been 10 cases, not 20 cases. But yes, the bottles went for $2,000 a piece. That was for Leslie's cuvee. And of course, if any of you have been following me prior to this moment, you know that press where I worked for many years was owned by Leslie Rudd and the Rudd family. So, sort of a special moment to honor his legacy after he had passed the year prior. So just, to give you an idea, I mean, not only are these wines incredibly rare, by extension, they are also incredibly expensive. So the retailers that are purchasing these wines, you're starting at minimum bids at about $10,000 and then going up from there. It really is sort of an electric room. It's a crazy situation when you are watching these go down. I have never bid myself. They are crazy expensive wines, but it is a lot of fun to see it go down. So let's taste. Oh, there's that like muscularity that I love from 2010. Oh, like massive amounts of graphite. And, remember, we're in 2020 right now, tasting a 2010, so 10 years of age on this wine. This wine saw a good bit of new French oak. But you're not getting a ton of that by now, 10 years on, 10 years of age. A lot of those things start to phase out. Oh, hey, Brett, I love it. What are these assemblages for these? Yes, great question. So this is, we are dealing with 100% Cabernet for all three wines this evening. So for the Antinori, for the Keenan, and for the Honig, 100% Cabernet, and all single vineyard at that, which is kind of cool. So man, this wine is jumping out of the glass and it's getting more floral by the moment. So all of that graphite is sort of giving way to some violets, a little bit of plum. And it's still really stern on the nose, for as much age as this has, you're getting really bright, intense fruit, which I love, and is always a hallmark of a wonderful wine that has not started to fade away and give way to some other things too quickly. So let's taste. Wow. I know we're talking about Premiere Napa Valley, but I have to tell you, if I had blind tasted this wine, I might not be in Napa. This is all of those old worldy things that we love, those savory elements, a lot of that more of that graphite coming in. It's a little bit more restrained. It is decidedly mountain fruit. It is all the intensity, all the muscularity, and all that sort of electricness that you love from mountain fruit. But you are getting power and finesse. And that is absolutely what I have always loved about the Antica wines. They sit in this place where, you know, you get all the sort of that Pritchard Hill area, right? They're not on Pritchard Hill, but they're kind of like right there. All of the wonderful things that we love about mountain fruit in Napa Valley. But, you know, I think because of the amount of sunshine they're getting, there is a softness to this wine that does not overwhelm you. I know we're talking a little bit more technical than we typically do. Sometimes I get more technical. Sometimes I get a little bit more ethereal. I think we'll be somewhere in the mix tonight for that. But I am just blown away with this wine. I mean, this is focus, precision, heaps and heaps of fruit, but we are diving into those savory secondary, tertiary layers. And this is a wine that wants to go the distance. I cannot wait to revisit this in about 10 minutes after it's had a moment to relax a little bit. Wow. It keeps going. I mean, another hallmark of a great wine. This is a wine that finishes incredibly, incredibly long. I mean, it's still going on my palate now, even as I'm talking. Carl, does it match up to the yesterday bottling? Well, I don't think that we can compare those, but sure, why not? I love the yesterday wine, but I have to say, this has a different sort of appeal for me. I mean, this is a little bit more of those graphite flavors, more of a savoriness. And a little softer in the palate. I mean, you're talking about a 2018 wine. So we're talking about a 2010 right now. So a little bit of an age differentiation, and certainly structurally in a very different place, but fair question, I guess. Let's dive into the 2016 Keenan. This is the Tribute 2. So this is going to be Michael Keenan, who is the winemaker. This is in tribute to his father, who founded Keenan Winery after an extensive search on the mountainside, looking for a vineyard that they could craft first growth-esque wines from. And I think they did that with Keenan. A beautiful, remarkable place, but very understated. If you've ever visited Keenan, if you're someone that loves, wineries that just feel like you're kind of thrown back in history, don't really feel like they've been affected by the rest of the world and the modernization they're in the best way possible, Keenan is that winery. They are just so classic and wonderful and sort of old school. If you're familiar with, I've talked about Smith Madrone here before, sort of has that Smith Madrone, just old school, like run and gun. You're not going to see all the bells and whistles that you might normally see at a fancy new winery in Napa Valley. This is much more about, old school presses, old barrels, big fujras, stone building, just a wonderful place. And the people there, it's still family owned and operated. It's kind of no frills, but in the best way possible. I'll never forget, I went up there and had a hot dog on their picnic table outside and just hung out and drank wine. And it was such a wonderful day. Christine, what am I using to extract? Great question. This is called a Coravin. This is my saving grace when I am flying solo, as I am right now. And I would hate to, as much as I want to maybe uncork these wines, I would hate to waste them. And what this does is allows me to take a single glass out without having to remove the cork. It replaces what is in there with a natural innocuous gas called argon, which just is the oxygen and allows the wine to remain sound for an extended period of time. Coravin says that, a year to 10 years is good. I've never experimented quite that long, but I will tell you, these wines go nowhere when I Coravin, and I love them for that. So this is my magic, my secret weapon when it comes to tasting wine, especially if I've got 3 bottles like this in front of me and I don't want them to go to waste, which they absolutely will if I open them, because I cannot drink 3 bottles of wine, sadly. So I just get to have a glass of each, which is a lot more fun, I think. Oh, Spring Mountain, how I've missed you. Who here has driven up Spring Mountain Road and just rolled down your windows and taken a big, deep breath in? I know I have. And in fact, I've actually had my car break down on Spring Mountain Road. So I know that smell all too well. It is very herby, herbaceous, wild. It's the rainiest, wettest EVA of Napa Valley. They get a ton of, not a ton of, but by contrast, a lot more rain than some of the other appellations. And it also happens to be one of the cooler appellations. So as a result, you have wonderful producers that definitely lean in the more old world style of making wine, namely Philippe Tongi. I mentioned Smith Madrone earlier. You've got, of course, Keenan's Spring Mountain Vineyard. A ton of wonderful wineries on Spring Mountain. You'd be remiss to skip any of them if you were driving up that road looking for a place to stop. Oh, hey, Mark, is that your favorite appellation? I did not know that. That's good to know. And I'm glad to see some Riesling with aged Swiss. I think you're crushing it. Maybe I won't compare, but I wish I had some cheese in front of me right now. But you don't have this, so maybe together we could, come together and tackle the world. Let's taste this wine. Oh, I cannot get over the nose. I think I'll be there for 5 minutes with this. One of the things that I love about Spring Mountain wines is all of that. Oh, there it goes. All of that. Good of you. All of that great sort of greenness. So, we talk about terroir, we talk about the smells, we talk about what's happening all around us. And I can't help but wonder, when we talk about whether or not terroir is a real thing, you smell wines like this. And I live not too far from Spring Mountain Road, and I live, just a stone's throw from the Spring Mountain AVA, and it does smell like this. It's not grassy, but it is minty and herbaceous, sort of that redwoody, wet underbrush, cedary, very woodsy sort of smell. And it's a gorgeous, gorgeous nose. And I get that not only with this Keenan, but I also get it, in spades with like Philippe Tongi, like I mentioned, Spring Mountain Vineyard. I think it's just a very distinct and sort of an appellation that that doesn't hide itself if it's made well. So I love that. Wow. Oh, man. These are the kinds of wines when people say I only drink Bordeaux or I only drink this, these are the kinds of wines when I think about Napa Valley, I think about the diversity that exists within this appellation, this wider appellation that is Napa Valley. And I think about Spring Mountain, I think about, just the dichotomy that exists, right? You can have wines like this being made on Spring Mountain, and then you can have, huge, big, opulent wines like the yesterday that we talked about, which is a totally different type of wine, and you couldn't begin to fathom that they're from the same place. And it's just so wild that these two wines can be made from the same appellation. And this is one of the things that I just love about Napa Valley so much is it's not just one thing; it's many, many different things, but the consistent variable being that they are almost always of an incredible and consistent quality. And I say almost always because we all know there's exceptions to every rule. So I'm not going to put a stamp on it that every single wine is wonderful for Napa Valley. I wouldn't dare. But I will say I'm so proud to be among the best wines in the world living in Napa Valley. And it is an incredible place. And, certainly these wines are showcasing just that. So as I taste this wine, and it's still, again, the hallmark of a wonderful and quality wine is length. Are you still tasting that wine? Is it still in your palate? It absolutely is. This is not a light wine. I don't want to misconstrue that as much as this has, sort of an old world tendency, it has a lot of savory elements, it has all of those herbaceous elements. This is distinctly Napa Valley, and this is a big, intense, broad, but focused wine. It's lifted, it's bright, it's bouncy, but it has all of those gorgeous herbaceous notes to it. And I think this is just so, so special. So this is their 40th vintage. So this is the tribute to. So this is actually the second time that they did a tribute wine to commemorate the 10-year anniversary of that from doing it before. This is two clans planted as bench grafts in 1998 that came to maturity that they decided to make this single bottling from. This is only 20 cases. Keenan, just a little history, as I mentioned, founded by Robert Keenan in 1974. He had looked for many years to try to find a place that he could make wines of a a caliber that would be indicative of first growth Bordeaux. And I think he certainly found that in Keenan. And of course, we don't just love their Cabernet. I love their Merlot. I love Keenan Chardonnay is wonderful. And these are wines that can age and should be aged. I've had these wines back in the 70s and the 80s, and they are exquisite, exquisite representations of just how long we can age Napa Valley wines. Why the different bowl shapes? I don't know what you mean. These are actually all the same bowl shapes. So I don't know. Oh, you know what? This is looking a little bit distorted here. If I do that, do they look the same? Maybe not. I pull it back. They are exactly the same glass, so they are not different bowl shapes. And these are not my favorite glasses, but here we are. They're just standard Bordeaux glasses. Pops and Older Keenan regular bottling a few weeks ago. Left Bank perfume with Napa backbone. I think you nailed it, Jackson Lane. That is a perfect way to describe Robert Keenan wines. Yeah, Left Bank perfume, Napa backbone. I think, wow, I wish maybe you should come do my job because you just summed that up brilliantly. And Carl, no, these are not Mark Thomas. These are, I'm actually not at home at the moment, which means I don't have my Mark Thomas glasses. These are just a couple glasses that I picked up at Target. So here we go. They're not my favorite, but they do the trick. Yeah, I mean, I think if we had to assign an appellation to it, if it weren't Spring Mountain, you were kind of flailing around, trying to figure out where this might be from, and you were like, it can't be from Napa Valley, it's got to be from Bordeaux. I might be in Saint Julien. I think it's got all of that like graphite-y thing going on, but it's not too intense structurally, and that's sort of one of the things that I love about Spring Mountain is it tends to give you all of the things that we love about Mountain, but it doesn't give you the intense tannins. So if you're not someone that loves those grabby, intense, big structuredness, that can be how Mountain and sometimes can be Mountain Beaters. Spring Mountain tends to gravitate towards being a softer style of wine, even though it is muscular and intense, it's soft in a different way. And I think of wines, from Saint Julien, like, well, of course I can think of any right now, but like Rose, that just really, there's a finesse and there's precision and there's sort of like this stealthy muscularity behind it. And again, we're talking about Napa Valley, but I think it's pertinent to the conversation given that Robert Keenan found this property wanting to emulate the style of Bordeaux. And I think, this definitely does that. This wine is, I am not sure if this is available. I meant to look for that and I am not sure. I imagine that it is. So if you go to the Premiere Napa Valley site and you search by Keenan, this is the 2016 Tribute 2 from Keenan Winery. You can see where you might be able to find this wine. The next wine that we are going to be tasting, unfortunately, is only available in Japan, but not unfortunate if you live in Japan. So I guess that works out if you're in Japan. Let's see. I would love to know what bottle that's in your cellar that you're most excited to open at some point in the future. Well, I think we've got 3 of them. These are, like I said, I cannot stress enough to you how unique and special it is to be tasting these wines. I mean, truly, I have not had the opportunity to ever taste really more than one Premiere wine that's ever been bottled. So to taste 3 in succession is pretty unbelievable. And, a huge thanks to the Napa Valley Vintners for making that possible to a few of us to have access to these. Because, what happens at these auctions is so special and it's so unique, but we never really get to see the finished product. We get to see it in barrel and we get a little preview of what's to come, but we never really get the opportunity to see how it comes to fruition. And I just feel so fortunate that I get to taste these. So let's keep tasting. I can't get your comment out of my head, and it's so frustrating because I literally can't think of anything else. I might have to like move on, squirt in myself like another half glass and just keep it moving to the Honig. Your Left Bank perfume, Left Bank, I find it up here now. It was so great, and now I can't see it. There it is, a Left Bank perfume with Napa backbone. Yeah, I mean, I think, it is decidedly Napa Valley in California in that it has, really juicy, ripe, gorgeous fruit. But there is this sort of like very perfumey Margaux-esque quality to this wine, with all of this like savory, sagey underbrush. I am gonna do that. I'm gonna Coravin myself just a little bit. Sometimes what happens with these wines, or with Coravining, is sometimes it can get a little bit muted, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna Coravin just a tiny bit more. I'm gonna set it to the side, and I'm gonna see what happens. Hello, with a few minutes of air. Hopefully my gas didn't just run out. Okay. So just reconfiguring myself. Mark, have any Premiere wines showed up in press wine list? They have not. Unfortunately, press, though we've got what I would consider, or press has what I would consider the best Napa Valley wine list in the world, Premiere wines were never something that the restaurant was able to purchase. They can be quite expensive. And so we sort of save those for the retail buyers, because I think, when you consider the markup of a restaurant wine, the numbers don't always make sense for us. And so to that end, we've never really been able to make that work. I did try this past year, but there are a few restaurants that can make it happen. And I think it's, awesome. And, how special it would have been to have a Premiere wine on the list, but no, unfortunately, that was never something that we were able to do. All right, so this last wine here is the Honig. This is the 2017 Honig, which of course is coming from this tiny block of on the crown of a western hill in Rutherford. This is just a half a ton of fruit that is going into one single French oak barrel, and made by the wonderful Kristen Belair, who was the winemaker at Honig. This is the wine that is only available at Nakagawa in Japan. So if you go on the Premiere Napa Valley website, you will see when you click on this wine where you can find it. And if you are in Japan and are interested in trying this wine, that is where it will be. So Honig Winery in Rutherford, I'm sure it's got a huge following. People love Honig. It is one of the most beloved brands in Napa Valley, and so I'm sure many of you are familiar with what they do there. This is a singular expression of a vineyard called the Campbell Hillside Vineyard. And so this is, just a tiny little section of that that they culled for this particular cuvee. What I love so much about this wine is that they actually made it in tea bins. So if you've ever seen, if you've ever, been around for harvest and you see those big sort of like plastic tubs where they sort of bring all the fruit in very often, that's a tea bin. And sometimes what happens is you've got these tiny little small micro lots. They can't fill up a full, full tank. So a lot of times what happens is they stay in these tea bins during fermentation. And so you get sort of this like hands-on approach. And it's a little like making a small batch of whatever, and so there's somebody there that's just doing the punch downs. There's no punch overs because of course there's no tubes attached to that. It's literally just you with a punch down and kind of moving it down, and then it's hand pressed into a basket press, which of course, if you've ever seen a press logo, that's a basket press. And so it goes into there, it's pressed out. And so it's a very, very gentle extraction. It's a gentle process. It tends to make for more gentle wines. And of course, being in Rutherford, where it's, the wines tend to be softer and a little bit more demure, but, with great intensity and great finesse, the wines tend to, I'm so excited to taste this. And of course, 17, marked, as I've mentioned before, marked by the media by being, a fire vintage, but certainly not a vintage that I would consider the fire vintage, given that the fires really didn't start until mid-October, long after most of the fruit had already been harvested. 17, we got a few heat spikes, but largely it was, considered a great vintage by winemakers. It was really, unfortunate what happened with the fires, and certainly there was destruction and devastation, but, we don't consider it in Napa Valley as a vintage marked by the fires. We consider it as, something that happened towards the end of harvest, but mostly the wines are great. And I think this is going to be a telltale sign of just how great the wines from 17 can be. Wow, that is so Rutherford. There isn't something specific about Rutherford. So when I think of the Valley Floor appellations, Oakville as being, big, muscular, but not in the mountain way, just being like, sort of opulent. And you think of St. Helena as having a lot more florality. We always think of it as like the Margaux of Napa Valley. So it's very violety and floral and sort of wild to some extent, but with great finesse and structurally beautiful. Rutherford is sort of like somewhere in the middle. It always has a softness to the fruit. There's always something just, very pretty, not too intense, but not too soft. And I love that so much about Rutherford. You think of some of the great properties in Rutherford besides Honig. You've got Camus, you've got Frog's Leap, you've got Round Pond, you've got Contessa. I mean, there's so many great wineries in Napa Valley in the Rutherford AVA, Sullivan. And, you could drive on either side of the valley, across the valley, and see, a handful of your favorites sitting in this AVA, and it's such a wonderful AVA. Honig, of course, being one of those properties that we think of. So I smell this wine, and immediately it's like it's that like crushed velvet. And I know that's, it's sort of like an on the nose reference, right? Like sommelier is trying not to say things like crushed velvet or smooth or bold. But it is. And I think that's, a perfect representation of Rutherford. It's just, it has this sort of like softness to it. And you think of it from like a texture standpoint, you think of like a velvet jacket that just, doesn't necessarily have a smell, but it has a feeling. And that's sort of what you get when you smell this wine. Plushy, plushy, plushy. And so soft and so lush. All sorts of purple and red fruit. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous mouthful of like freshly picked berries, maybe just, sat in the sun for a minute with a little compote. And, someone just kind of like took and kind of smashed them up a little bit. Carl, no, I mean, possible smoke taint in 2017. Unlikely. I mean, you're definitely going to have some people that are going to try to get away with selling fruit to some lesser, how do I put this? Will there be smoke taint in 2017? I can't say for certain, no. But when you're talking about, wineries with any sort of reputation, the answer is no. I mean, it happens so late in the game. There were a few vineyards that were scorched and fruit was definitely lost. Certainly up on Atlas Peak. Atlas Peak, there was a lot of devastation there. That is where the fires began. So no, if fruit wasn't harvested by that point, then sure. But honestly, it was such a warm vintage with those crazy heat spikes that happened late August, early September, that so much of the fruit had already been harvested. It really pushed all of the ripeness to a point where most of the harvest was done by like the third week in September. So by the time, early October was around, I remember going to Rudd Estate, a week before the fire started and filming and checking out what was going on at harvest there. And that was the last time they were picking. I mean, that was their last pick. And they were pulling fruit down from Mount Veeder. So even Mount Veeder was ready. So to answer your question, no, 17, like I said, I think it's one of those vintages that people are always going to think of the fires because it was so mainstream in the media. But for us in Napa Valley, it was a really, really challenging time. But, we were so lucky that the vintage played out the way that it did, that there won't be very much smoke taint in 17. We're very, very fortunate for that. I can't say for certain that will be the case in 2020, but certainly in 2017, I don't have a lot of concerns. But always taste everything. I think before you buy, if you can, and this always comes down to know your farmer, know your grower, know your winery, have a relationship with them, and I think when it comes to integrity, there's so many wonderful producers in Napa Valley that have so much integrity, and really across the board, most of them do. I don't think that I've ever met anyone that I feel like has been trying to pull the wool over my eyes. So I have no fears of 17 and this wine, not even like a whisper of any sort of smoke taint. I mean, gorgeous, lush, plushy fruit. And clearly, it's interesting because when you talk about single vineyards and singular expressions of a vineyard, you're talking about precision. And so how do you have a wine that's so precise but still has so much nuance? It's not an easy thing to do, but it really comes down to the quality of the fruit. And this is, clearly a quality site that, clearly has been made in a way that had a lot of hand touch and high touch. And I think this wine shows it. Texture. I mean, Rutherford is all about texture more than anything. We think of the softness that comes out of Rutherford, and that is what this wine is. But you know, it still has those nice silty tannins. It still has, you know, layers and layers and layers of complexity. This wine just, you know, won't stop finishing, and it is so young. So I'm curious to see where this will go. And of course, you know, I've had the luxury of tasting some great Rutherford wines that have, you know, 15, 20 years of age in them, and they are just exquisite. That softness, you know, you think because Rutherford, is a little bit on the softer side, that these wines would sort of fall apart after any given time. But you know, I think of you know, it's funny, Carl, you bring up Scarecrow. I have to say, you know, I've had older Scarecrow, and they stand up, but more than that, I've had some of the etudes that come from Rutherford and from, you know, the old J.J. Cohn vineyard that is now Scarecrow. And they are some of my favorite, and in hot vintages, you know, 2002, 2000, 1999, 1997, you know, from vintages that are warm, and they still just won't give up. And I think it, you know, it speaks to some of these incredible vineyard sites that we have in Rutherford. And it's, you know, I think this wine is a perfect representation of that. Plushy. Yep, absolutely. I'm going to go back and retaste these wines now, so that we can have a little revisit now that I've tasted all the way through and they've had a minute to sit in glass. So this is the Antica. This is the 2010. So this is the wine that had a little age. Oh my goodness. Oh, that makes me so happy. Oh, there's so many great savory things that are coming. You know, it was all graphite and violet before, and now it's, you know, getting more into that underbrush, you know, a little bit of that sage. I think of that sort of Pritchard Hill area, and I think of sage. I mean, there's just wild sage everywhere. And a little bit of menthol and eucalyptus now. Man, this wine has changed so much in glass. And again, you know, wines of quality like this, they're going to give you lots of different things. They're going to give you, you know, it's not going to be a one note thing. You know, if you let it sit and you let it do its thing and you keep going back to it, it's going to give you more and more and more. These wines are so cool to taste because they, you know, I'm never going to taste it again, but you know, they are truly a singular expression of one person in one place so many times. And this is a great representation of that. Oh my gosh. Wow. It is just singing. Holy moly. Jumping out of the glass, but like, it was like 15 things all at once. Like my mouth is so confused in the best way possible. Like savory over here, violet over here, herbaceousness up here, rosemary down here, sage. I mean, just like, wow. I need to take another sip. That did insane things. I mean, wow. Exquisite wine. I mean, truly, I don't think I've ever had another wine like that. I mean, with 10 years of age, for that wine to be in that place, it is perfect. It's perfect. I mean, there's nothing more to say about that wine than all the things that you want in one glass. You've got floral, you've got non-earth, you've got fruit, you've got everything in there. And that, you know, super academic way of looking at it, but it checks every single box. And wow, that is just superb wine. Gorgeous. Wow, cannot wait to drink that in just a few minutes with some meat I've got marinating over there. Okay, I'm gonna go revisit this 2016 Keenan. And this again was, this is from Spring Mountain District. This was really sagey, sort of herbaceous, you know, just smelled like Spring Mountain if you've ever driven up Spring Mountain Road. Oh my gosh. Oh, how cool. Wow, really diving into like more of the fruit now. And this, you know, this fruit, you know, all of that great herbaceousness that was like, you know, just so overwhelming at first, and in a good way, is really allowing the other stuff to come through now. So it's giving way to this really sort of precise fruit and this sort of like rose bush. Oh my gosh. Wow. It's so cool. I mean, these wines, these wines have a sense of place. They have purpose. They have, I mean, it's everything you want in a wine. It's everything that you think of when you think of well-crafted wines. And wow, extraordinary. I mean, just truly mind-blowing in a way that, you think you know Napa Valley, and you think you've tasted these wines, and certainly you think that you've tasted these wineries, and these are so surprising. You can really feel how much care went into the making of these wines and how boutique these are. I don't think I ever really understood until this moment just how unbelievably exquisite these are. That's unbelievable. I mean, wow. One of the best wines I've ever had in Napa Valley. I hope that I can find one of these bottles and hang on to it for 20, 30 years, because that's an extraordinary wine. Wow. It checks every box. I mean, again, same with the Antica and with the Keenan. They couldn't be more different, and yet they all have what feels like someone just cradled this wine and just extracted every single thing they could out of it, and sort of like shined up a stone, and they were like, here it is, the best expression of what I have to offer. That is what this wine is. It is magnificent. It's truly, truly gorgeous. Wow. All right. Well, I guess we should revisit, even though it was only just moments ago that we had this Honig, but let's go back to it anyway, shall we? Oh, well, even this has changed. Oh, it's going much more into the fruity side of things. Just for a split second, I got a little cherry pie. Oh, it's super cherry. It is like baskets of cherries. I mean, just tons of cherry pie, baskets of cherries. I can't wait to see that wine. That wine is not at a place where you can see all of the things that we were getting from the Keenan and from the Antica, but I have no doubts that this wine is going to continue to evolve into a place like we talked about with the Etudes and with other wonderful Rutherford wines, i.e. Scarecrow and Camus and Frog's Leap and Round Pond. Wow, just truly, truly a special wine. Gorgeous. Well, I don't know about you, but my teeth are stained. And this has been so much fun, and I thank all of you for staying with me. Safe to say, Keenan is my favorite. I really hate playing favorites, but I have to say, to me, that was the wine that had me on the brink of tears. So I guess it was my favorite. Yeah, this is special. But I think like you, Mark, I have a real soft spot for Spring Mountain and some of my favorite producers on Spring Mountain. So I think, I probably have some sort of bias for Spring Mountain and in particular Keenan, because I think Keenan is one of those great, great producers that makes wines that are incredibly ageable. And it's clear that this wine, is an ageable, beautiful wine. So, wow, what an incredible experience to be able to taste these wines and to be able to taste them with you all and to have documented the process. If anything, this is really just for me to hopefully have for future self to be like, hey, what were those wines like that I'll never get to taste again? So these wines, with the exception of the 2010 Antica, they are listed on the Premiere Napa Valley website. So if you below here, there should be a link in my description. If you go to premierenapavalley.com, you will see you can filter by winery, by varietal, by vintage, by whatever, and you can see some of these wines and where to find them. And like I said, they are not easy to find, and they will only be available in the one place that is listed. Save for maybe secondary market if for some reason someone decided to give up their bottles to an auction or something like that. But the reality is, these wines are truly one of a kind. You will not find them anywhere else. They are only made once, and very good, and in tiny quantities. So, I consider myself lucky every single day to be doing what I'm doing, but I think even more so today to have tasted these wines and to have gotten to share that experience with you guys. So I really, really thank you all for tuning in. Wow, I mean, 32 of you are still watching, which is so cool. I count my blessings every day that I get to do this for a living, and it is not lost on me that you all spend time with me. So I thank you for doing that. And if you have any questions, always feel free to comment below on this video if you're watching it after the fact, or send me a message on Instagram. I'm very chatty in the DMs. I have wonderful conversations in there, so I'd be happy to talk in depth about more of these wines if you're considering maybe making a purchase. And if you are a buyer, if you're someone that has the opportunity to go to Premiere Napa Valley, I encourage you to do so. And I'm happy to share my experience with you, as I'm sure Carrie, Jody, and Taylor are as well. So thank you again to the Napa Valley Vintners for making these wines possible. Thank you to Honig, to Keenan, to Antica for making these gorgeous, gorgeous little unicorns. And I hope you all enjoyed this. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.